Hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. We are in Monterrey, Mexico, and we are doing our first urban dialogue of 2024. Last year, we did six or seven of these interesting conversations with keynote speakers. And this year, we are planning to do the same again. So this is the first one in the series of this year. So we are hosting it from Tecnológico de Monterrey. My name is Rob Kochma. I'm a distinguished professor in regenerative culture, and I will be your host for today. And we have three wonderful speakers. Chi Yao, who is in China at the moment, Cecile Konijnendijk, he is in the Netherlands, and Martin Sanchez, he is in Monterrey. He is the one who is closest by. Today we'll talk about urban forestry, trees in the city, let's say, how they can increase the biodiversity, but also how can they improve the urban climate. So I'm looking very much forward to hearing and listening to the three speakers. The order of the webinar is as follows. We will have three presentations, and after this you can put your questions, or actually during their presentation, you can put your questions in the chat if you have them, and we will discuss these questions you have after the three presentations. So if you have any questions or suggestions during the webinar, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. We can read them immediately. If it is a very simple question, we can just answer it immediately. But if it's interesting for the audience, then we can put it in the conversation between all of us. So the first speaker is Jiao Han. She is an associate professor in the Agricultural University in Nanjing in China. She is landscape architect, and she has been working on several very interesting projects during her studies in Queen's University in Belfast on how species are moving through the city and what the city can do to facilitate that process. If you want to share your screen, Chiao, so we can all see your presentation, the floor is all yours. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me. My name is Xiao Han. I'm from Nanjing Agricultural University. Previously, I worked as a PhD student with Professor Greg Keefe at Queen's University Belfast. So today I'm going to talk about the roles of urban afforestation, the roles of large-scale urban tree planting to facilitate forest migration under climate change. So now we know that we are in a period of the most rapid warming since the last ice age. One major consequence is that about 80% of species have moved towards the poles since 1970s. However, such movement can't guarantee their survivals if they are not be able to move fast enough to keep pace with the moving temperatures, especially for those relatively immobile tree species. Well, in general, the speed of tree migration would be 1 kilometer per decade, which is far behind the speed of climate change, which could be 10 kilometer per decade or even 30 kilometer per decade. In such cases, for example, the migration of tree species temperature tree species would lag behind climate change by more than 97 kilometers by this century. Well, actually, massive shifts in the distribution of trees have occurred a few times during the past glacial interglacial transitions. So here are a few illustrations showing the migration pattern of trees in North America and in Europe after the following the retreat of the ice. And actually, pollen records like this show that most tree species were able to track climate change in the past. but today they are facing a very different situation. So now, due to our increased urbanization, future tree migration will have to overcome substantial anthropogenic barriers, cities. In previous eras, trees gradually shifted their ranges through an uninterrupted landscape, but now they are facing agricultural land, buildings, highways, and other infrastructure. These are the things that trees didn't have to deal with in the past and will greatly reduce their migration rates or even leave them stranded. Moreover, the migration of trees largely depends on their state dispersal agents. However, due to hunting and habitat losses, we have lost many important state dispersers, like passenger pigeon. So this photo was taken by myself in Manchester Museum. Many birds and mammals, like passenger pigeon, played important role in past forest migration and were lost today. So how can we help these climate refugees? Or in other words, how can we facilitate the process of forest migration? And that's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So now if we look back to the migration pattern of trees in the past, we could easily find that trees didn't move directly from their original range to the current range. Instead, their migration started from their outlier populations, which largely reduced the required movement distances to track climate change. And locations of these outlier populations are called climate refuges, which provide suitable climatic and environmental conditions for species beyond their main distributions. Well, so this gives us an idea. We know that due to our urban heat island effect, cities are already ahead of their surroundings in terms of climate warming, and that could provide suitable climatic conditions for the establishment of outlier populations at higher latitudes than their native ranges. So we propose the concept of using cities as hot stepping stones for tree migration. So the red figure illustrates the potential of using urban heat islands in Greater Manchester and Birmingham, stepping stones for the migration of European oaks. We also noticed that since trees can cool their environment, planting trees in cities can slow the rate of warming, which in turn allows them to grow for decades to reach their reproductive maturity for further expansion. We then proposed an adaptive management approach to use cities as hot stepping stones for forest migration. And our framework includes 3 steps. The first step, seeds or seedlings collected from their native ranges are used to establish outlier populations at a high latitude city where the climate is suitable. And then in the second step, assuming the first step is successful, translocated species will grow and reach reproductive maturity, accompanied by their ability to cool the city. So finally, seeds produced by the outlier populations in the city are then dispersed to surrounding areas to establish naturalized populations. And our study shows that if we use temperate cities as hot stepping stones, we could reduce migration lags in broadleaf species by about 59 to 182 kilometers. So this suggests that with a careful selection of species, urban tree plantings could play an important role in shortening or even eliminating migration lags in tree species. So this study has already been published in Nature Partner Journal Urban Sustainability, entitled Cities as Hot Stepping Stones for Tree Migration. Well, although cities can be used as climate refuges to establish outlier populations for trees, another problem is how to help species to escape from the city to establish naturalized populations in surrounding areas. To do so, we then explore the roles of urban green spaces to facilitate the city dispersal and the process of forced migration. We use Greater Manchester in the UK as a case study, which have obvious urban heat island effect and has great potential to act as stepping stones for the migration of many tree species. We focus on the role of urban green spaces as to facilitate the movement of city dispersal agents, especially birds. Because birds are very important city dispersal agents for forced migration. They can carry seeds for very long distances, and this gives us some ideas. Since birds could fly, they don't need physically connected landscape to support their movement. What they really need are stepping stones, or more specifically, network stepping stones. So from this perspective, our highly modified and fragmented urban landscapes actually have the potential to act as stepping stones for city dispersal. For example, even something as simple as planting a tree in your own garden might aid the activities of birds. So here we exploit two general afforestation strategies to facilitate the process of forced migration through Greater Manchester. The first strategy is planting trees in private gardens and the streets. So this strategy aims to create a large number of small habitat patches to act as stepping stones for city dispersers. And the second strategy is to establish large woodlands to form large habitat patches for city dispersal agents. So in this study, we considered three city dispersal agents in Greater Manchester: Eurytia jay, Eurytia siskins, and coatis. These three birds have different requirements of habitat area and have different dispersal distances, which largely influence their dispersal network. So, as discussed earlier, the migration of trees depends on the foraging activities of birds. So we assume that landscapes with higher abundance of birds might have a high probability of city dispersal and therefore are more permeable to the migration of trees. Our assessment of city dispersal was based on an observation in biology. That is, the occurrence of birds is influenced by the accessibility of landscapes. Trees that are more accessible in a dispersal network usually have a higher frequency of visitation by birds, and they are considered as harbs. Well, this is a slide of the dispersal network of Eurytia jay in Greater Manchester. Simply put, we use land cover data and spatial records of jays to analyze their preference in flights, based on which we then model their movement between urban green spaces. We then transform the dispersal network into a graph that looks like this. Every node is the stepping stone for birds. We made the node size proportional to the patch size. So bigger nodes are bigger patches. After that, we use graph analysis to measure the accessibility of each node, considering both node size and internode connections. And we got a network like this. A warmer color represents higher accessibility. Now, if you look at the network, even though the visual complexity is still very high, it is clear that only a small number of stepping stones have a very high accessibility. So we did some mathematics to study the connection, connection and the contribution of these stepping stones to the overall network of city dispersal. And what we found is that for all the three city dispersal agents that we studied in Greater Manchester, jays, siskins, and coatis, their dispersal networks have a particular kind of structure. That is about 20% of nodes are responsible for 80% of the overall network connectivity, which is known as the 80-20 rule. So these 20% stepping stones should be given more attention for protection as habitat hubs. Well, then we use space syntax to measure the accessibility of improved city dispersal network due to our two afforestation strategies. And we identified green spaces as important hubs for city dispersal showed on the left, and then model the flows of forest migration across Greater Manchester showed on the right. We colored the areas red if they have high probability of forest migration, blue if the probability is low, and yellow in between. So our results indicate that planting trees in gardens and streets have a marked effect on the spatial pattern of migration pathways, whilst establishing large woodlands achieved a significant increase in the probability of forest migration. Well, finally, the argument I'd like to make here is that urban landscapes should be given as green networks. They have some kind of properties that cannot be understood just by studying the individual. We believe that a network-based perspective can be very useful for designers to understand how urban landscape works and function, and to devise smarter solutions for climate adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yao. Very interesting study. I think to use the city as a forest and try to increase the migration of trees and forests in the city. And I think one of the things that struck my mind is that over a period of time in the given rapid climate change, we need to act really fast, isn't it? So if this strategy, especially the larger woodlands, if I understand it right, is the main factor that could be successful in helping forests to migrate through the city. How fast do we need to go? How fast do we need to act to make it happen?
Well, I think it's actually there's no exact right answer for your question, because they have actually lots of species, tree species that need to migrate through urban areas. We just need to make resilient and redundant networks that could have many lots of city dispersal agents to move across urban areas. So that's why we propose two general tree planting strategies, because around the world that all governments are announcing tree planting moment, and to encourage people to plant trees in urban areas and in rural areas. So we think that's a chance, that's an opportunity for us to study which is the right place to plant the right tree, right? So and we can help the tree migration and help other climate adaptation efforts.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I understand you have to, you cannot give a right answer that we need to act within 5 years, but we have to act fast. That's clear, clear enough. But there is hope, I think, based on your presentation, that we can transform the cities in a way that it will actually contribute to mitigating climate change, and also provide a better, environment for not only people but also the ecology in the city. Thank you so much, Yao, for now. I think I had a little message from Samuel that he wanted to respond. But Samuel, if you want to put your question or remark in the Q&A, we can see what your comment is, and we will respond to that. So we will move to the second speaker of the day, and that is Martin Carlos Sanchez. He is working in Tecnológico de Monterrey for several years now in the Ruta Azul program, which is the sustainability and equity program of the university. And he is very much interested in sustainability issues for a long time. Looking at, I think, and he will talk about this, the trees on all the campuses and how they could contribute to capturing greenhouse gases. So Martin, very much welcome. If you want to share your screen and start the presentation, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Very nice to meet you all and very nice to see you all. So I will start the presentation now. Well, I'm going to share with you a few of the projects that we have we have done in the last few years regarding our sustainability plan. I'm not going to go too much into our sustainability plan. I'm just going to show you a little bit of how it's structured. So basically, as you may know or not know, our sustainability plan has 6 major working areas. The ones that we're going to focus today is adaptation. Sorry, some things are in Spanish, but it's our marketing. It's our marketing material, so you're going to find lots of things in Spanish. So Ruta Azul is our sustainability plan, has these 6 major working areas, which is culture in the middle, mitigation, adaptation, education, research, and networks. So we focus, as you can see, a sustainability plan needs to have this holistic and integral focus, because it's not only about facilities, it's not only about efficiencies, it's not only about interventions and all. It also has to be a lot of collaboration. It has to do about research, and it has to do about the main things that we focus on in Tec de Monterrey, which is education. So Ruta Azul has many projects today. I want to share with you the adaptation axis or area, which is basically what we're trying to do here is in this axis or in this area, we're trying to reduce vulnerability to present and future climate change impacts. And as you can see, right now in Monterrey, yesterday we had 39 degrees and it's winter time. So it's becoming more clearly the necessity to have this sort of initiatives in our universities and in our communities as well. So what we're trying to do with this area is to promote this adaptation and resilient projects in our campuses, but not only for our campuses, but also for our communities. This is something that when we were creating this plan, that we discuss a lot, that we are not isolated and in our cities, we're not enclosed, quite the opposite. We are trying to be integrated with the community, and we want to participate and share what we have and knowledge and resources, and of course, and our facilities. So while we are seeking to implement these initiatives to reduce our campuses and our communities' vulnerability to climate change. And so as you may all know, Tec de Monterrey has lots of facilities all around the country. To be precise, we have 39 facilities overall, 25 professional campuses, 10 high school facilities, 2 hospitals, and 2 other facilities for postgrad and graduate programs. So as you can see, we have campuses all over the country, and Mexico it's a big country, and it has lots of climate zones, different climate zones, pretty much all of the climate zones registered in the world. So and given that our geolocation, given our position in the world, well, we are a very, very vulnerable country for climate change. We are surrounded by 2 major oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, and overall, as you can see in the map, we are considered one of the most vulnerable countries for climate change. Not the most, but definitely one of the most. Actually, we have around 2,469 municipalities, from which 1,800 are cataloged as very vulnerable, highly vulnerable for climate change. That's more than 70% of our cities, of our communities are considered highly vulnerable to climate change. So, as you can see, it was very important to start thinking, or it's very important for us to think of how we can, as a university, promote initiatives that can well help us fight climate change overall. And as well as we have campuses all over the world, Mexico. I'm sorry, all over Mexico. We do have different situations in each campus. Each campus has its own context. Each campus has its own necessities. So it becomes really important to not only actually acknowledge these campuses, but also get to know them, get to see them, get to actually listen to what's going on in their campuses. So I always wanted to start with this picture right here. As you may know, we have a major hurricane a few months ago in our shores in the Pacific, in the city of Acapulco. So when we started planning, when we started actually creating this plan and well, overall this area, the adaptation area, this is what we were up against, right? This is the major challenges that we are trying to prevent, not prevent, maybe just to adapt to. So as you can see, it's becoming really complicated, complex, and challenging to actually develop initiatives that can help you out with this sort of extreme weather events as Otis. Otis overall change from tropical storm to hurricane category 5 in 24 hours. So it's impressive, and if you think about it, it's how can you actually adapt to it? It's very complex to actually measure the true impacts of climate change that we're going to live in the following years. We have an idea. We have of course we have models. We have the IPCC models, but however, how can you prepare for this sort of challenges is the question that we usually ask ourselves when we are well developing these initiatives. And all considering this as well, one of the major challenges that we have, and I think it's a common thing in many major cities. But as you can see, not so long ago, we have terrible air quality in our city, Monterrey, where the main campus is located, the main Tec de Monterrey campus. So we have for a few days we have the worst air quality index in the world. So it's becoming more relevant, not only to actually be prepared for climate change resilience, but also to actually start implementing initiatives that can help us what's going on right now, which is the major challenge of pollution, overconsumption, waste, and so on. So this is something that really becomes a very important topic in the table, because overall the city of Monterrey, where we are located, or the main campus is located, is surrounded by many beautiful mountains, as you can see right here in the down the left. We are surrounded by this big mountain complex, and overall we do have many natural resources, but I guess, and as many other places happen, this has been compromised for development, right? So we usually promote, especially in a country like Mexico, we promote development and instead of actually protecting our natural resources. And that's becoming a little bit too dangerous, because we are starting to see the consequences in our quality of life, not only in our in our air quality, but in the way we live in the city. So I'm gonna change. So as we mentioned in our sustainability plan, we were trying to promote these initiatives that have some impact overall in our campuses, of course, but in our communities overall. So we wanted to actually, in part of our goals for 2025 for a sustainability plan, is to, first of all, we needed to rethink our green areas or trees and the immense value that has in our campuses and our communities and our local ecosystems. Usually we think of them of the trees in our campuses as a nice ornament, but we wanted to rethink that, or we wanted to change that, and to give actual value of what there was going on in our campuses. So when we wanted to start this this area, when we were starting this adaptation axis, we wanted to see where we are. We have some questions overall when we were developing this major goals. But first of all, we needed to know where we were standing, what we have in our campuses. What do we have? We have a few. We only have glimpse of information back then, and how are we taking care of this valuable, precious trees and green areas. So basically, where we're starting is trying to understand what was going on in our campuses. As I mentioned, we have 25 professional campuses, and overall, the team that supports the sustainability plan, it's mostly here in Monterrey. So we're not there every day. And as you may know, when it comes to this practices, and when it comes to actually get involved with trees and their ecosystems, you need to be there. You need to be inside. So we actually starting to asking these questions. We wanted to know where we are. We wanted to know what do we have, and how we are managing it. So we starting developing some initiatives circling those questions. We develop a sustainability assessment that I'm not gonna address too much in this presentation, but basically we're starting to see where our campus's performance in terms of sustainability indicators, how much energy are consuming, how much waste is generating, and so on. But however, we also wanted to see, we wanted to get to know our trees and our green areas, and overall create a national inventory that will help us understand what was truly going on our campus. So overall, what we started developing is this inventory that I'm going to talk a little bit more in a little bit more. And also we develop these policies, which is actually a general overall manual that can help us out with the management of our tree inventory and our tree in our campuses. These policies will help us to actually overall have the best practices in taking care of our campuses, and also for future projects, for future initiatives or future interventions in our campuses. This manual and these policies, will help us out with this. So basically, what we have with this tree inventory and green areas inventory, as a general outcomes, we have overall roughly 76 members of our operation staff around all over our campuses for around 2 months. We developed this project. Each campus has their own brigade for actually counting the trees, taking information relevant for inventory, such as height, width, the diameter to breast height, if I remember correctly in English. So basically, it's all the relevant information, how old is he approximately, is it the health, the general conditions of the tree. So overall, took our campuses around 2 months to develop this all over the country. We were at some of this campus, we were there, we were actually helping them. Some of them we were not. We were actually remotely helping them and trying to give them advice and trying to give them some sort of tips on how to actually measure your trees in your campuses. So as I mentioned before, we have the inventory of 35 facilities, and overall we counted around more than 78,000 trees were counted in our facilities. It's a little bit more than that, and the most common species that we find was the eucalyptus and the ash tree. And so we find many other information. We're actually, with this information, with the measurements that we have for each tree, with the overall the major database that we have, we also develop a project that it's we were trying to calculate how much CO2 equivalent is being captured by our trees. And we have been refining this calculation for over almost 1 year, roughly. using more than 1,700 plus formulas and factors for different species. As you may or know, each species has different potential for carbon capture. So overall, we have been developing this calculation, and we're hoping to have a more refined calculation this year. But basically, this has been a major effort because we have many types of different species. Some of them are local, some of them are foreign, and so it's been complex, but it's been also very rewarding. Overall, as with this databases, we were able to create this dashboard. It's on Looker Studio. It's an open dashboard. I can show you the link after we finish the presentation. This is an open dashboard. You can check out our calculations, how many trees, what type of tree is the most common, what are the green areas, the square meters of the areas of our campuses, what's the most common species, how many species, number of trees from that species as well. And we also have the major data sheet for each campus, right? So this is a brief summary of what we have in our campuses, but we do have the major database that you can access as well. It's completely open. So overall, we ended up with this dashboards, but we also this geolocation maps with our trees. So each campus has their own map, which you can identify the species, the major taxonomy family for the tree, and you can see where that tree is located, and also have an idea of the diversity of the campus in each of the maps. So this was also work that we created. I forget to mention, but this collaboration was with Professor Mario Manzano, which is also a professor in Tec de Monterrey, and his team. So this actual work, it's the combination of research teams, operation teams, and administrative teams as myself. It's a major collaboration between many areas of Tec de Monterrey, which has us give us this amazing result. So overall, as I mentioned, these outcomes, these amazing maps, the dashboards, and overall the results that we achieved, there were actually lots of information that we have for each campuses. But I think one of the most valuable things that we managed to actually take from this exercise and this initiative was to see our campuses as they are. We see that our campuses are full of life, full of diversity, full of things that we are doing right. As anything, we all have opportunities areas, but we were doing lots of best practices in our campuses to take care of our trees. We get to see how they were taken care of. We help them see what the major areas of opportunities we have. But basically, what we learn about this exercise is our campuses are full of life, and we needed to take care of that. We wanted to take care of that, and we want to preserve that. So this actual exercise helped us understand and value the diversity of all the things that we have in our campuses, all the trees or the green areas, all the species. We learn a lot, and obviously what we're trying to promote, and I think we promoted with our operations team, our local teams in our campuses, was to actually appreciate and value this this amazing things that's going on in our campuses, the diversity, the value of it, and I think this exercise helped us with that, combining with the general outcomes. And overall, this after we finished this project, we also developed with the help of our research team. We also they help us develop this national tree management policies, as I mentioned, which it's complicated because it's as I mentioned, we have campuses all over Mexico, and the fact that each tree needs a special treatment. Each species has their own characteristics. Each species has their own tricks, and so we needed to create a general overall policies so we can help our campuses in the process of actually taking care of for each situation. If you want to make a reforestation, well, this is how you want to do it. If you're located in each region, if you want to do check out for the trees, you want to see the conditions of the health. This is something that you need to consider. If you want to actually manage to move a tree, well, this is something that you need to consider, and so on. So these policies also are this is focusing on our operations team, but I'm gladly happy to share it with you. But unfortunately, it's all in Spanish, so you have to excuse me for that, because all of our teams we share this for all of operations teams. Okay, so basically this was the presentation, our major outcomes for this project. I guess for the next steps, we wanted to, as I mentioned, we're working hard to reduce the vulnerability for future and present climate-related risks. We want to increase our resilience and adaptation capacity. And for that, we are trying to promote projects that take care of our diversity in our campuses. We believe that with this information, our campuses have the tools and the skills to actually promote various initiatives to take care of our trees, to take care of our green areas. And also, we want to, in the not in the far future, but in the near future, we want to calculate and measure the thermic and surface temperature with thermic and surface temperature models in our campuses to actually measure the interactions between our trees, the trees that you see in our campuses, and our facades or our buildings, and to measure not only the benefits of actual having the trees for quality of light, but also how many other benefits does it have for our campuses and our communities. And of course, we want to continue with our refining calculation of the carbon capture per species. So I think that's it for me. Thank you very much for the space for this time, Rob, and happy to answer your questions. And obviously, I'm going to share with you the resources that we saw today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martin, and impressive work and very, very detailed. So it's amazing to see how we're doing actually. Can I ask you one question? Because it is interesting to see that we now know where the trees are, how well they're doing, how much carbon roughly they capture. And you were talking about, yes, we need to take care of them and we need to preserve them. But is there also a strategy of increasing the amount of trees or doubling or whatever kind of number you want to put on it? But is there a strategy to, let's say, improve beyond knowing what we have?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. That's the next step. Yes. Well, that was also a next step. We're trying to actually procure the funds to actually promote the better, increase these numbers of trees. Especially, we have identified certain campuses that are actually in need for this reforestation. We didn't actually go through a lot, but we have campuses in extreme that are going through extreme droughts, which is what we're one of them in Monterrey, but we also have several in other states that are facing this extreme weather events. So yes, we have identified these campuses with high vulnerability to climate change between all of our campuses. And we want to start with them. We want to start increasing the trees in those campuses. There's around 5 campuses that are considered extremely vulnerable. And overall, we want to start, first of all, with this amount of campuses, procure the necessary funds to do it, and then measure the benefits of it. And well, after that, we will try to procure the funds for the following stages. As you can see, it's a complex operation for all the amount of facilities that we have all over the country. But yes, to answer shortly your question, yes.
Thank you so much. And I have also one suggestion: to migrate into the city. let's use the work of Chiao and see whether we can, see Monterey campus, all the other campuses as the first hub for migrating forest. I think that would be a very interesting strategy to follow. I just want to talk to the audience a little bit, because if you have any questions or suggestions or thinking around what is going on at the webinar, please do put your questions in the Q&A section, and we can get back to that when we are finished with the third and last presentation of this webinar. Cecile Konijnendijk, I think I'm pretty much the only one that you have internationally that pronounces your last name in the right way. So welcome, Cecile, and very much welcome to the webinar. Cecile is, I think, one of the most well-known thought leaders when it comes to urban forestry in the world. He has been a professor in the University of British Columbia for a long time, writing several books, being the editor-in-chief of different journals. Please look him up if you don't know him already. He is currently the co-director of the Nature-Based Solutions Institute, which I think is based in Sweden, and working on all kinds of solutions that create a better natural environment for all of us. And I don't know if it's already published, but I think it's about to be published, if not already, his new book on rethinking urban green spaces, which I think is excellent title, because we need to rethink our green spaces that we have in the city. Very much welcome again, Cecile, and if you want to share your screen and share your presentation with us, that would be wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob, for the invitation, and also Tech to Monterey for putting up this really interesting lecture series, webinar series. And I really enjoyed the previous speakers, Chiao and Martin's perspective, and I think some of it you will also see in my talk, which is a bit more kind of big picture, moving towards what I call the forest city, right? So a city that actually embraces its trees, embraces its forests, builds strong relations between people and trees. And my perspective is that of an urban forester. I've been working in this field of urban forestry for close to 30 years now. So it's almost a lifetime. So I'll talk a little bit about the fact that I think, and we heard it also from the previous speakers, we're taking urban trees and vegetation more seriously these days. And it has to do with things like, of course, climate change, public health challenges, but also, for example, economic reasons for cities to embrace vegetation in different ways. And of course, biodiversity is another big factor. So we focus on green benefits. We heard already some great examples from the previous speakers, but it's also really important to realize, of course, that not everybody is always happy with trees and vegetation. There could be some fears, there could be some disservices or nuisances that we also have to manage as we green our cities. And great to hear, by the way, that the Tech de Monterey has such an ambitious program to assess its trees and green spaces, but also to actually expand that. I think that's really wonderful. I'll talk a little bit about the governance and management approach, and then finally ask the question, are we heading to the forest city? Are we really seeing that cities are on a large scale starting to embrace trees and building urban forestry programs? So starting with taking urban green seriously, I think an important factor, of course, is climate change, but another important factor has been the COVID pandemic, where I think many people started realizing how important it is to have trees and nature close by, close to your home. Many of us, of course, were in full or partial lockdowns, and we were really happy if we at least had some nearby green that we could sometimes look at or even maybe go into. Now, this is Vancouver, where I was during the start of the pandemic. And luckily, the city of Vancouver in Canada kept its green spaces open throughout the pandemic, while a city like Toronto, also in Canada, closed off its parks from basically the get-go because they were afraid of contamination risks. So, but of course, for people in Vancouver, this was really essential that we could still go out, could still enjoy nature, while, of course, keeping a distance, physical distance to other people. And I think this links a little bit to the general idea, the realization that trees and vegetation provide a host of benefits to cities, to towns, to any settlement you can imagine. Sometimes we package that in new concept like nature-based solutions. We talk about biophilic cities, cities that are embracing, loving nature, and where nature really is part of the fabric of cities. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting approaches ongoing that are also starting to really spread, I would say, throughout the world. In the US, they sometimes talk about natural climate solutions, which is kind of nature-based solutions, but then with a real climate focus. And we heard already in Mexico, of course, the whole climate agenda is also very, very important. So nature-based solutions is great, right? It sounds really nice, but it also has a very anthropocentric approach. So it's really about nature solving our problems, and we create as humans, of course, lots and lots of problems, and tend to forget that we're part of nature too. So we actually, a few years ago, we launched this idea of nature-based thinking. So rather than just using nature, but actually saying nature should be part of basically every decision we make in cities in terms of planning, designing, managing landscapes in urban areas, and trying to think more about cyclical processes, leaving space for nature too. And that could mean actually some more spontaneous vegetation, wilder nature, which of course then on the other end could also cause some problems because people feel that this is maybe not so desirable if nature goes a bit too wild. So I already mentioned, so I call myself a global urban forester. So urban forestry is really the idea of seeing the city as a forest. So combining all the trees, all the vegetation that's related to trees and forests into one system. And of course, it's not only about the trees and the forest, it's about all the other living beings, including humans. So it's a socio-ecological approach. It's a field that was established in the mid-1960s in North America, starting in Canada and the US, but now really has become a global interdisciplinary field with, for example, in Vancouver, at the University of British Columbia, about 300 students now, undergrad students, taking a full bachelor program in urban forestry. So this is really an emerging, but I would say starting to be established field. We have books, we have journals like Urban Forestry, Urban Greening, which is a pretty high impact journal now. And yeah, a lot of resource, a lot of interest now, I would say, from both the science community, the research community, but also from practice and policy. So of course, this is all very much focused on the benefits, right? So what do trees do for us? And we already heard some great examples earlier, climate adaptation, but there's also things like health promotion, biodiversity support, cooling, air pollution reduction, you name it. And a lot of these benefits are nicely shown here by this illustration by Cities for Forests. You see the sustainable development goals here at the bottom. Things like health and water and sustainable communities. And then you see how trees and forests play a role in these different SDGs, but also in terms of the kind of the landscape that goes from very urban on the continuum to more remote and rural. And I'm sure you can recognize this image also for your own cities. And of course, I work mostly kind of in the inner city environment, but also work a lot in the nearby forest environment, kind of the interface between city and surrounding area, where of course we often see forest and nature areas, mountains, etc. So yeah, a lot of focus on benefits, and this is a nice publication that I helped the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe develop, which really looks at all these different contributions that urban forest can have, and here grouped into climate resilience, economic benefits, and social benefits. There's a lot of interesting information. You can easily find this all for free, available on the net if you're more interested. But that these benefits are really essential, I think, has become really, really clear. So we see a lot of great publications coming out, not just in the green literature, but also in the white literature, so the medical journals. And this is a study that evokes a lot of attention. Came out last year in the Lancet, one of the top medical journals. It actually found that if you as a city can reach a tree canopy cover of about 30%, you could save during heat waves about 1/3 or even maybe up to 40% of premature deaths. So people who die during heat waves, but wouldn't have to die, right? They could still live. You could save 40% of those lives, which is actually pretty amazing. So cooling a city by even 1 or 2 degrees can already have a really big impact. And of course, we know that if you look at local cooling through shading and let's say the thermal comfort that people experience, the impact is much larger. So being under a tree can feel 20 degrees cooler sometimes than the surrounding area. So it's really important to look at expanding tree canopy in our cities. I already mentioned this idea of trees and vegetation is a nuisance. So there's all kind of studies now that come out that what are these nuisances? So People could stumble over tree roots. People may be afraid that the tree falls on their house or on their car, but it could also be wild animals that roam in cities. And I definitely had a flavor of that when I lived in Vancouver, when we had bears and mountain lions coming into the city every now and then. So, but it could be raccoons, right? It could be wild boar. It could be all kind of animals. So we have to realize that sometimes people feel that, okay, these nuisances are not something I want. I don't want too much green and water back in my city because I get mosquitoes, and with mosquitoes come diseases, and so we have to really carefully manage those. Yeah, so a lot happening, I would say, in terms of bringing urban forestry into being, into programs. Many cities now have urban forestry strategies and management plans. If you go north from Monterey, not so far north, I guess, you come to the United States, where the Biden administration launched a very ambitious new program for urban forestry as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And from a budget that was maybe 150 million US dollars annually, they raised it to $2 billion US dollars, where the focus is very much on expanding urban forestry, urban forest cover in vulnerable communities. So communities where people have lower income, where there's a lot of BIPOC communities, but also areas where there's often very low tree canopy cover. So there's a lot of problems with heat, there's a lot of problems with health. So pretty amazing to see that. And you see, if you go on social media, every single day, there are new jobs announced now in the US in urban and community forestry, which is really great to see. But this is a worldwide phenomenon, as said. I had the pleasure to work in many different countries. A city like London has pronounced itself a national park city, which turns around the entire idea of national parks, of course, to say the city can be a national park. But of course, London has some stunning green spaces, stunning urban forests. And they really want to put the emphasis on the fact that the city is really also nature, is also a landscape. Places like Singapore, of course, have really led the way in greening, integrating green into its development, but also Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, which is now trying to raise its tree canopy cover from less than 1% to 9 or 10%, and establishing 440 new urban parks, as well as greening mosques and school and so. And of course, yeah, here questions come, right? How do you do that sustainably? What kind of trees can you use? How do you deal with water restrictions? If Monterey is, of course, very dry, but Riyadh, I can tell you, is also very dry and warm. So you have to really think creatively about how to green the city responsibly as well. But yeah, a lot of large-scale projects now worldwide. Also in China, so I'm sure that Xiao knows a lot about this, but the cities like Beijing have large-scale urban forestry programs now. Really ambitious targets. So Beijing planted 50 million trees in a few years, is doing another 50 million. So 100 million new trees, often in forests, but also in tree planting in the city. And this is, of course, very complex. There's a lot of different actors and stakeholders. There's the role of farmers who one day are farmers and the next day they're actually becoming a forester because their land is now a forest. So this is really an interesting approach. And I've had the pleasure to work a little bit with some of my Chinese students on analyzing these kind of large-scale programs. Back in Europe, so I'm based in the Netherlands, but in Spain, where I lived for a few years before I came back to the Netherlands, a city like Barcelona is really leading the way in kind of taking space back from especially cars. So of course we know that our cities are heavily dominated by cars. So Barcelona said, well, we have to change that because we have very high air pollution levels. Livability in parts of the city is really not so great. So let's take our block structure and let's take 3x3 blocks, call these a super block. And then within these blocks, we're going to remove a lot of the through traffic. We're going to create new public spaces at the intersections. And that also requires then that actually streets are closed off, partly dug up, new trees are being planted. This was the street where I lived. And this is pretty spectacular, right? That the city is for example, making 23 new public squares, planting trees. People are now playing volleyball on the intersections where cars were often in queues not so long ago. So yeah, pretty major changes. So that's great, right? Policies, governance, but of course we also need to really think about planning, design, and management. And just a few minutes to finish up my talk on that. So yeah, working with some principles I think is really important, right? How do we do strategic urban forestry, green space planning, things like bringing trees and nature close to everybody through proximity and visibility. The connectivity, of course, we have already heard also from Xiao is really important. Diversity, we also heard, right? Having a diverse urban forest, many tree species, but also the diversity of experiences, of types of green space, and the diversity of people, because we all have different preferences for the type of green and nature we want around us. And a lot of focus, and I also heard it also a little bit earlier, is the idea of equity, tree equity or green equity. So making sure that everybody in a city has access to a good urban forest cover, good green spaces, where today often, of course, many people don't have that. And often these are also the people that need green most because of health, in health problems, etc. So we did some work with the Flemish government in Belgium. They asked us to kind of analyze, okay, what do we know about the relation between urban forest and nature on the one hand, and health and well-being on the other? And we developed this kind of guide, unfortunately only in Dutch, but looking at different types of green, different elements, different ways of combining green networks, and the impacts on mental health, physical health, and as well as social health, and actually also cognition, learning, cognitive development. And we found 4 intervention areas where you can really win a lot in terms of health. You can increase your canopy cover, so really good to see that Tech de Monterey is actually looking at that. You should increase the number of kind of small parks in neighborhoods, pocket parks, tiny forests, you name it, all these kind of small areas that you can bring into neighborhoods. You should have more community gardens so people can garden together, which is good for social interactions, but also makes people physically active. And finally, really importantly, is also to make more green schoolyards. So to green schools, be it from kindergarten to university. So once again, great to hear that Tech de Monterey is taking up this challenge, because green schoolyards are places where people are spending a lot of time, campuses, but they're often also in pretty harsh conditions. So we really have to green those and make sure people have physical green, but also green they can actually use, for example, for play and study. So I made a little contribution to this a few years ago, about 3 years ago. I launched this idea of the 330-300 rule. There's quite some evidence to support, especially the 30 and the 300, but I won't have time to go into that in detail. But the idea is that everybody should be able to see at least 3 large trees from where they live, work, or go to school. Everybody should live in a neighborhood with at least 30% tree canopy cover, and nobody should have to walk more than 300 meters or maybe bike if needed to the nearest high quality public green space. And if you find those 3 together, you can actually promote health and well-being, but you can also cool. You can also make sure that things like biodiversity are promoted. So this is really a recipe for urban forestry. And I sometimes joke that I wrote a lot of papers and so as Rob said, but my highlight was maybe when the rule was actually featured by the French Cosmopolitan a few years ago. They said, well, this is a great concept for making us happier in our cities, which is of course great to see. I haven't seen so many studies from Mexico yet, but a little bit south from you in Ecuador, in Guayaquil, they did this 330-300 analysis, because you can really analyze at neighborhood level, what is your current status? How do you want to develop 330-300? How can we make the city greener and better? And Rob already mentioned the book that is actually now just published, Rethinking Urban Green Space. So I try to link up the 330-300 as well to some kind of meaningful concepts. How can you bring greening urban forestry to people? And the idea of having the tree as doorstep trees, so make sure you have trees nearby in your garden, in your street, that you have a special relationship with. Street woods, so linear woods in your street that actually can help you connect to neighbors, but also cool your local street and neighborhood. And then finally, to kind of rediscover the idea of groves, the ancient idea of spiritual wooded areas for learning, for community, that we could also bring back into our cities, would then represent the 300 rule. So finally, you can also do some kind of temporary urban forest to kind of reacquaint people with trees. They did that in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, where they had this temporary forest of big trees and containers moving around the city. And of course, we have to think about things like, okay, the soil, right? Great to put more trees in, but how do we create enough soil volume, enough space for these new trees? And colleagues like Jean-François Gauthier are working with that. So finally, some reflections. So I think these are really exciting times, and it was also wonderful to hear the projects from Manchester and from Mexico. But there is a sense of urgency. Rob already posed a question, right? How fast should this go? Well, I would say it has to go very fast, because cities are changing very, very dramatically in a very short period of time. Luckily, we have a lot of good research to build on, and also implementation is starting to increase. And I think as urban forestry community, we are now making a difference from street to street, but also from agenda to agenda, from medicine to planning to economic development, etc. So maybe the question is of the arrival of the forest city is hopefully a rhetorical one. I hope this is really true. And I think, yeah, seeing all the examples around us, we can be a little bit hopeful, but more needs to be done. And this is one of my favorite urban forest neighborhoods, which is in Berlin, a great area where you actually can be pretty dense, a lot of people, but also have a lot of trees and a lot of green spaces. It's called Friedenau. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for your inspiring talk and your view around the world. We had a tour, I think, in every corner of the globe, maybe except for Australia and Africa, but maybe that's an area to explore further. Maybe it's good to. I think sometimes you're right. I mean, all our academic work and publications do reach an audience, but if you manage to be in the Cosmopolitan, what else do you wish for? I think. I mean, you reach an audience that you never would reach otherwise. So I have one very specific question about Barcelona, because I think that the initiative to transform those public spaces from car-dominated to green-dominated ones is, of course, a fantastic strategy. But do you know how the people in the street and in the neighborhoods responded to that proposal, and did they change their mind after it was implemented, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. So, I mean, the whole idea of the superblocks is actually already like 20, 30 years old. So it was hard to implement because there was pushback, for example, from people with shops. They felt it was hard for people to come with their car. COVID helped sped it up, so then it could be implemented. But there was definitely pushback. And actually, a court in Barcelona ruled not so long ago that the program was implemented illegally. So it would have to be stopped. What I understood from my contacts in Barcelona is that there's a lot of political issues. So the former mayor was really pushing this. The new mayor doesn't like it. I also heard from some of the people behind it that actually after a few years, and they've done some pilots in Barcelona, after a few years, people actually turn around. So he said, usually you start 50-50, but then after 2-3 years, you see that actually 70-80% of the people is supportive. So there's some studies done that show that people are already sleeping better. Mental health is improving in this area. So it is actually, it does take a little bit of time, but usually people do end up being very positive about it.
So we need courageous politicians that make the right decisions in that sense, no?
Very true. Very true.
And pursue it for a longer period of time instead of doing just a one-off, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to mention that you can still put your questions and suggestions in the Q&A section of the Zoom, and we will discuss your questions immediately. I have one question to all three of you, maybe, and it is, Cecile, you mentioned in the beginning of your talk, it's time to take urban green seriously, and I think that is a very interesting statement. Of course, who can be against this? But because people are dying, air quality is improving when you apply it. There is changes in the humidity, and the water scarcity problem will be solved in a way. So there's not a lot of reasons not to do it. Why do we still have to? Or let me put the question differently: how can we take it seriously, and how can we move forward in a sense that we really transform our urban spaces in the pace needed, given the urgency around us? So maybe it's a question for all three of you. Maybe Chiao and Martin, you want to respond to this first, and what are your thoughts?
Chiao, please go ahead, and I'll go after you.
I think there's actually many people that not very positive to urban green spaces. For example, some people are sensitive to some certain tree or plant species. But I think in the long term, because we are the government or the social media are encouraging the benefit of urban green spaces and the benefit of plants and trees. So I'm actually very positive to developing urban green spaces. Yeah, I think there might be some issues in high density urban areas when we have limited areas for urban development, and we also need some green spaces for to provide good environment for the local or for residents. So yeah, I think that could be a really issues that need to solve. Yeah.
Thank you, Chia. Yeah, great. Martini, you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that I think when you start living here in Mexico, Rob, I think you have noticed. I think overall we see our trees as we see it as a service. We always talk about the tree benefits and the services that provides for us, right? But overall, I think that's as an issue that we have as a community, not only here in Mexico. Perhaps it's a common thing to believe that it services only us, and we need to rethink how trees benefits they're not only for us, right? And so that mentality serves to change that idea that perhaps having a tree is not only beneficial, as Cecil showed us, is not only beneficial to your health, to your development, to everything related to human activities. It's not only that, but it only benefits to, as we can see, to help our ecosystems, to help our diversity. So I think it's still there's still some pushback in our communities because we still believe that nature itself is in service for us. So if we continue to have this perspective, it's going to be complicated to see that, especially in countries like Mexico. When I think I mentioned briefly in my presentation, we always focus on development and economic growth because we are a development country in developed country. So it's complex for us to think in other things, especially for the general of the population.
So I mean, that we also, of course, and the difficulty to get that done. As Cecile mentioned in his presentation, we need to start seeing that we are, as human beings, we are part of nature instead of seeing nature as something external that is there for us. So this is not so much about the number of trees or the quality of the trees or the species, but it's more about the mentality of the people that they start seeing that in a different way. So yes, we need to have a social psychological transformation probably. Cecile, you want to add to this?
Yeah, no, these are great points, right? So I think actually the key point is the mindset. And the other key point, I think, is the fact that green is still seen as something nice, right? It's really not seen as critical infrastructure. So I think as soon as we move into the area, we start putting hard norms and guidelines like roads. There's very clear guidelines and norms for things like roads and sewage systems. And so we have to do that for green. So that's also the idea with 330, 300 to start kind of developing things that even could be put into legal terms, maybe in some ways. So a city like Malmö in Sweden, they've actually now put 330, 300 into their master plan. So it's actually now local law in a way to follow it. So I think we need to be a bit stricter there to implement our ideas.
Yeah. Martin, do we actually know, have we analyzed, for instance, the 330, 300 rule for our campuses? And do we comply with that or?
No, I just screenshotted that part. That was super interesting. No, we haven't actually measured that. That's super interesting. We actually wanted to promote some KPIs because at Tech we love KPIs. We actually trying to promote some KPIs that can help us measure the amount of trees that we need for our population, for our habitants in our campuses, and also the amount of green areas needed as well. Our campuses fortunately have lots of green spaces. However, in some campuses, as I mentioned, it's complicated because of the weather to maintain and sustain those tiny ecosystems. But however, no, that would be super interesting. I just screenshotted it, Cecil. So because I thought that was amazing, and I think that's something that can help us out to measure that, because if I think you know more of it, Rob, but here in Monterey we don't have enough trees, and I think that was a really interesting point of to start measuring the progress of our city. And even though we are surrounded by mountains, we do not have enough trees, and we do not have enough green spaces, and that's something that is lacking. And unless you are in the south parts of Mexico, it's something that is lacking constantly in our campuses.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We at the moment there's four students from the Delft University working on Monterey, and one of them is actually doing the analysis of the 300-meter rule, and he makes a regional map of Monterey and sees what are the areas that are lacking, proximity to that space, and he does black and white, so you see a large black space which is without proximity to within 300 meters from a larger green space. So there is a lot to do in Monterey, but also I imagine that is a thing that is widespread over the world. Cecile, I have a very concrete question for you. Someone is looking for a job in urban forestry in the UK. Alexis, I think I don't know if you know this, but Alexis, if you are with us, you can also come to Mexico and work in urban forestry here, no problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there are definitely interesting jobs emerging. So there's a whole discussion in the UK around also tree equity, for example. So communities, municipalities are looking more towards this. Some really good consultancy companies in the UK. So feel free, Alexis, to reach out, send me an email, and I can send you a few hints.
Thank you, Cecile. And I think there's one other question of Kim, who is one of the other Delft students working on Monterey at the moment. And she's asking, is it also possible not to have a forest, but also other types of land use, like urban agriculture? And I think you mentioned that briefly in your presentation already. Is it also possible to?
Great question. Yeah, for sure. So within the 330-300, the 300 part, right, there could definitely be an area which is, for example, an urban agriculture field which has public access. The 30 is really fixed for trees in terms of the evidence. So, but you could definitely, like if you go to a rural area, you could start working with similar principles, right? But yeah, this is the 330-300 is pretty tree focused. But as said, within the 300, there's definitely a good space there to work with different types of green areas.
Oh, great. I think we're nearing the end of the webinar at the moment. I just wanted to mention that we will be launching very soon an initiative for people in Mexico, and maybe from everywhere, I don't really mind, to have a calculation about their carbon impact and translate that in the number of trees that they need to provide to the environment, to the city. And then we will make sure that we will plant them in the city. So that is a little bit a bigger scale than the campus, but as you will probably see on the map, the campus of Monterey will actually be pretty good, but the rest of the city lacks large green spaces. So that is an initiative that we want to launch very soon and create what we call La Hora Verde in the city. When we do this for Monterey, we can also expand that to the other cities in Mexico. So if you're interested in that, just contact us as well, and we can calculate for you, and we will happily planting trees all over the place. But this is for the future. Now we have done, I think, a fantastic webinar together with fantastic examples, speakers, and presentations. For me, it was very inspiring, and I think after this, get back to work, plant trees, and create, as Cecile says, the forest city, which I think is a great concept to think about the city. Thank you, Chiao, Martin, and Cecile for your contributions. It was exciting, and I'm looking forward to future collaborations with all of you and see what we can do together. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yep.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing that I need to announce, of course, is the next Urban Dialogue, which will be held on 17th of April. And we plan to discuss we plan to discuss degrowth. What can we do and learn from the principles of degrowth in cities that are addicted to economic growth? So hope to see you all again in 2 months from now. Thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Have a nice day.
Bye.